In the northernmost part of Republic of Croatia, at the crossroads of cultures in the lowlands known throughout the history as the Insula inter Murom et Dravam, the island between Mura and Drava, Murizel Murakosh, or better as Međimurje, the centuries in which life was strongly marked with energy of courage, decisiveness, battles, unity, survival, and development, are remembered. Deep traces of evidence, the deepest in the Međimurje history during 16th and 17th centuries, were left by Zrinski family of Count. They were aristocrats, soldiers, Croatian governors, and large estate owners who for centuries led exceptionally successful life in extremely hard general social conditions. As far back as 12th century, the Šubići family are known as mighty nobility in the Zadar hinterland and the governors of Bribir. They possess a number of fortified towns including Bribir, Oštrovica, and Skradin as the most outstanding ones. In 13th century, they cherish a constant relationship with Venice. They have a primary role at European courts and move in circles of outstanding political personalities and rulers. Their estates in the region grow even bigger. Along with their ancient stronghold of Bribir and the surrounding estates, they acquired the strong town of Zrin and some new estates in the north, in Slavonic Banja of that time. Since then, they are called Šubići Zrinski. During 15th century, their position of the new territory becomes even stronger. King Matija Kurvin grants a permit to them to excavate ores. They develop silver mines, obtain permit to mint coins, they restore manors. They possess fertile and well-inhabited estates. They live mainly peacefully and build a line of fortresses. In 16th century, their policy is wise. They plan entering into influential marriages with aristocratic families. Through favorable contexts of inheritance with the most powerful magnates of the region, the Frankopani, Karlovići, and Rudi families, they spread their estates deeply into Hungary and they rule over thousands of people from Adriatic to Graditeljska in today's Austria. The male members of Zrinski family are brave warriors and skillful army leaders. The Habsburgs need them to protect their interest in the region. They are awarded with numerous functions, services, and estates. Their positions are mainly those of Bans, commanders-in-chief, to Krajiški divisions and important fortresses, governors, and etc. They are consistently engaged in battles, but they also lead a good life. They possess numerous castles, dress and eat luxuriously, and have ensured a channel through which the luxurious goods from Europe and from Venice in particular reach their estates, especially Čakovec. In 17th century, they continue to teach their sons to fight in wars, but now they are systematically educated at European universities. Education becomes even more important to them. They become poets and respected intellectuals. They are Bans and prominent political figures of the empire. They go to wars for the Habsburgs against the Ottoman army, but at the other battlefields of Europe as well. They spread their economic power, they develop and put in shape estates, build and develop trade routes and trading. They become a competitor to the Habsburgs. The most important aim to the Habsburgs is to strengthen the borderland region in its existing territory and to keep peace with the Ottoman Empire, because other European battlefields keep them busy. Because of the scandalous peace treaty of Vasvar in 1664, which the Habsburgs signed with the Ottoman army, the Zrinski are angry and disappointed. They decide to rebel, enter into a high nobility revolt, and organize a conspiracy together with the Frankopani and the most important Hungarian magnates. The conspiracy is led by Nicholas Zrinski of Čakovec, who unfortunately dies hunting for a boar in the grove of Kušanec near Čakovec on 18 November 1664. Petar Zrinski takes over to lead the conspiracy. He is a brave soldier, but politically inexperienced and naive. He fruitlessly seeks support against the Habsburgs in Europe. At home, he doesn't get any support from the church or home nobility either. Petar Zrinski then draws a desperate move and seeks help from the most bitter of enemies, the Ottomans. At first, the rebels plan to achieve within Turkey, for Croatia and Hungary, a high degree of internal autonomy. The Vienna learned immediately about the negotiations with the Turks held in Salonika, and it was decided to take drastic measures against the rebels. They should be promised mercy and lured into Vienna. Of course, the Turks did not have a slightest intention to help the conspiracy. Seeing the breakdown of the rebellious plans on 13 April 1670, Petar Zrinski and Fran Krsto Frankopan set off from Čakovec for Vienna. They were immediately arrested in Vienna and charged with high treason. Intending to militarily break even the slightest possibility of resistance, all rebels' estates were taken by the imperial army. All the rebels' estates were throughout robbed even before the Chamber Commission came to confiscate the mobile and immobile properties. They were beheaded on 30th April 1671 on the town square in Vienna, New Place. The drastic revenge on Croatian aristocrats was also fatal for their families, but for the Croatia of that time as well. The Petar Zrinski family was completely destroyed. The Zrinski were eradicated in an unheard-of way from the Croatian and European political scene, having left deep traces there. Their political activity was aimed at preserving the Croatian territorial integrity and sovereignty of the Croato-Hungarian kingdom. The rich architecture of Međimurje is also their valuable heritage. Međimurje was their biggest and the richest estate, and by getting power over Međimurje in 1546, the Zrinski significantly increased their reputation. To a large extent, they linked close to the Hungarian nobility and became the Middle European aristocracy. Čakovec immediately became the seat to the numerous family. Nicholas Zrinski and his wife Katarina Frankopan, the daughter of Ferdinand Frankopan of Ozalj, had a large family. Therefore, immediately after a permanent deed of donation for Međimurje on 15th April 1554, in Čakovec they began the construction works which will turn the Ernust castrum into a modern Renaissance-style fortress and a comfortable dwelling place for the numerous Bonds family and company members. During the reign of the Zrinski, the fortress of Čakovec underwent many architectural changes. Hard historical circumstances of constant Ottoman danger forced Nikola Šubić Zrinski, but his successors as well, to direct all of their potentials to the construction of as safe as comfortable a new family seat as possible, and to an even effective organization of protection of Međimurje, their new, the largest and the most valuable property. During the Zrinski reign, the old noble town was reconstructed into a Renaissance fortress where in the center of a four-wing place was built. The first reconstruction of the noble castle was conducted from 1556 to 1559, the time of Nicola Zrinski of Sighet, under the guidance of Martina Sek and Giovanni Arconti, the engineers. The remaining architectural heritage says that by the end of 16th century, the Zrinski built a strong protection system around the newly erected place. They kept part of the existing walls together with a semicircle keeps in the outer protection system and built the bastions with full Renaissance characteristics. The new bastions bear two typological characteristics, bulwark-like and the newer pentagon-shaped with the extended lateral side, which offered an excellent defense of the fortress moat with the fire protection. The Čakovec fort became a mixture of the old Wasserburg and a Renaissance fortress. Upon the order of the court war consul, the first military architect Martin Stier, 1630 to 1669, came to Međimurje and left valuable drawings and data related to the Čakovec fortress. He outlined the strong Čakovec fortress in a ground plan viewed from the northern side. During the first half of 17th century, the semicircled keeps were removed from the northwestern stretch of the wall and the polygonal bastions was built. The reconstruction design was made by the Italian architect Filberto Lucchesi. He created a modernized pentagon fortress whose new look is preserved in the Giovanni Giuseppe Spale graphic presentation, dating from the 17th century. The construction activities of Nicola Zrinski of Čakovec were focused on the reconstruction of the fortress. Namely, the unfinished fortification from the Čakovec fortress did not quite meet the safety standards imposed by the borderland engineers who built the fortress of Varaždin. There were a few weaknesses. The description of certain object precisely locates the facility related to the defense and supply of the fortress. Spala lists the ammunition storages, a town guardhouse, rooms to accommodate a large number of soldiers, the mill turned by horsepower, and he also draws a half-moon revealing in front of entry bastion, which in effect strengthens the fortification system. Along with the construction of the fortification, the Zrinski built a sumptuous Renaissance palace. The palace has the shape of a closed quadrangle with a spacious inner courtyard. The ground floor wall on the northwestern and southeastern stretch of the courtyard front was decorated with arcades. In the architectural sense, the palace has 4 floors. ground floor, raised ground floor, first and second floor. Following the crush of the Zrinski and Frankopani conspiracy and the death of Adam Zrinski in 1691, the Čakovec estates fell into the hands of court chamber, and from 1719 to 1791 it was in the hands of Czech aristocrat Counts of Althan. The Althans are the Čakovec estate owners who took over the estate objects in particularly poor condition. The old town of Čakovec was particularly found in a state of ruins. The evidence of such a state, along with the plans for the necessary repairs, was left by Stjepan Jasenski, Esquire, who stayed in Čakovec in 1720 as a member of the Royal Terrier Commission. The description of the state was drawn before the big earthquake which struck Međimurja on 30th April 1738, after the fortress has been held for a while in 1704 and 1708 by Hungarian rebels, Kuruks, led by Franjo Raskosi, the son of Jela Zrinski and grandson of the Ban Petar Zrinski. The Althans decided to restore and renovate the town thoroughly. The court architect Anton Erhard Martinelli was hired. Martinelli did not build a new palace, but rather decided to renovate and extend the existing Renaissance four-winged palace, giving it Baroque features. The renovation and Baroquization began in 1738 and finished in 1743. Today's second floor was built, internal arcades were erected, and the old bell tower was pulled down. The definite and consistent Baroquization carried out was the result of a powerful architectural personality, which was in it ground plan organization and architectural forms identical to the Baroque construction created of Austrian and Czech regions. The four-floor wing enclosed a rectangular courtyard. Only the western wing corner avant-corps stand out from the closed building block. They are in fact the reshaped corner turrets of the previous palace. The organization of inner area is based on an even array of rooms, which are on each floor followed by the corridor along the courtyard fronts. On the ground floor lateral wings, the corridor is open with arcades. The stairway is enclosed in the mass and in its modesty subordinated in a spiral organization. The fronts are executed in flat geometric elements which build shallow and angular layers of wall surfaces. External fronts are visibly accentuated. Above the raised ground floor, a huge line of Doric columns alternate with wide horizontal bands and stylized rustic elements in window axes. The only more plastic accent on the main floor is the portal cut in stone. Above it, leaning upon triglyphs, is the balcony. The console surface of the balcony is increased with a forged iron grid, which also constitutes the balcony fence. Lateral and real front are the simplified versions of the main front. Above the main bastion entrance, the Althans built the new Baroque tower with a clock. This is why it was necessary to thoroughly renovate and fortify ceilings in the entrance bastions. Dating from that time is the multi-storied building between the entrance bastion and the southeastern one, which was due to its dilapidated state removed in the 17th of the 20th century. For the purpose of entering the left and the right wing of the side buildings leaning to the old fortress bulwark, the stairways with roofed porches were built on the courtyard side. In the architectural renovation process, a lot was pulled down and deconstructed. Such an extensive restoration required a lot of construction material. Since there was no more Ottoman danger, part of the fortification system was deconstructed. At that time, southeastern and southwestern bastion was pulled down. This stone material was used to execute the corner reinforcements of the palace. Baroque-style complex of the Čakovec Old Town was finished in the mid-18th century. The Paulist Josef Bedeković book Natale Solum gives the Gabriel Thaler graphic presentation of the Čakovec Old Town in its full Baroque splendor. After the Zrinski and Frankopani conspiracy, estates of all conspiracy leaders were confiscated. Prior to that, all the properties were registered. Of course, the registration was carried out after the plundering and already been done. The Zrinski Manor of Vularia was a multi-story building which was actually a palace in its looks and comfort. It consisted of 7 rooms and a separate house for 3 servants and their families. In a specially designed room there was the kitchen and a cellar for 30 wine barrels. The manor contained all the necessary equipment and was built in the best material with the hands of a good handicraftsman. It was estimated at 300 forints. During 16th and 17th centuries, Vularia had a first-class economic importance for Međimurja. The Zrinski family farmstead and the manor house were there. On 15th March 1649, the farmstead manor house was the scene of drawing up the text of the agreement of estate sharing between brothers Nikola and Petar Zrinski. The agreement itself was executed at Zagreb capital on 19th July 1649. Nikola took over Međimurje, the largest, the most important and the richest family estate, as well as the estates of Vrbovec, Presek, Čakovec, and the houses in Zagreb and Vienna. Petar was granted Božjakovina, Ribnik, Ozalj, and the estates in Primorje and Vinodol area. Nikola's seat was in Čakovec, while Peter's was in Ozalj. In order to have his own residence for his stays in Međimurje, the manor in Priblislavec was granted to Petar Zrinski. The Lapšina fortress on the Mura River was built by Nikola Mlakovački, a well-known hero and frequent winner of knight tournaments. He was a commander to military garrisons in the Bajica fortress in southern Hungary, as well as in Čakovec. He excelled with his extraordinary strength and bravery. He was a fervent follower of Protestantism and a great friend and a personal advisor to a court Juraj IV Zrinski. In 1670, Lapšina was held by the Baron Lukatelji and in 1718 by Baltazar Patačić. Namely, in 1708, it was devastated by the Rakosi troops. It was renovated under the Altan's reign. The Lapšina court is indirectly mentioned in 1768 by the canonic visitations, and the building material was taken away in 1932. The constructed Priblislavec castle had a large vaulted cellar that was hard to access. The first and the second floor had 11 rooms, together with a sanctuary in the neglected chapel and two rectangular in a shape roofed cabins near the kitchen. The castle courtyard was spacious and fairly protected. The roof is partly thatched and partly covered with wooden boards. The floors are old, wooden, and covered with boards. The previously used kitchen and cellar were not vaulted. The largest part of the family belongings that were left behind a scandalous plunder after the Zrinski and Frankopanik conspiracy crush were moved to Priblislavec castle. The exceptionally worthy the Zrinski family library, mainly created by the Count Nikola Zrinski of Čakovec and supplemented by his son Adam, was also moved to Priblislavec. Priblislavec had a huge alod, the largest one organized on the property of the Count Adam Zrinski at that time in Međimurja. The Priblislavec manor at the time of Adam Zrinski had 350 acres of plow field. The landlord's vessels in Priblislavec were engaged primarily on those alods to serve their work rent, but could also be appropriately used elsewhere. Count Adam Zrinski wrote an addendum to his testaments in Priblislavec on 23 April 1686. He wrote his first testament in Vienna on 5th April of the same year. Namely, because of his leaving for the war against the Turks as an Austrian army colonel, he wanted to avoid all inaccuracies and in case of his death ensure that his will is strictly carried out. Indeed, Count Adam did die in the Great Battle of Slankamen in Srijem on 19th August 1691 and was buried in Vienna. Priblislavec was the last residence of the Zrinski family. In order to ensure protection against the Turkish plundering raids of Međimurje, the Zrinski built a strong defense belt on the river Mura, consisting of strongholds and fortresses of Legrad, Novi Zrin, Kotoriba, Podturen, Lapšina, and Štrigova. The Štr, clear and easy for reference map of Croatia, has the Međimurje fortresses on the Mura marked. As far back as 14th century, Legrad is already a fortified place. And in the Queen Maria document of 1384, Legrad is mentioned as a place on the Mura banks belonging to the estate with a center in the Somogy county. On the eve of serious Ottoman threat at the end of 15th century, in 1488, Legrad got a stronger fortress and the name Market Town. In 1546, only Čakovec, Štrigova, and Legrad were fortified places of the Čakovec estate owners. These small places had the status of market town. Count Juraj IV Zrinski completed the construction of Legrad fortress. In that year, King Maximilian ordered all inhabitants of Međimurje to build Legrad and Count Zrinski fortress. A year later, a great battle took place under the walls of Legrad, in which Juraj IV Zrinski soldiers utterly beat the Požega-Skenderbeg army. This place has retained the name Turkish Graveyard to this day. The inhabitant of Legrad, Gaspar Svastic, killed Skenderbeg in the battle and, as a reward, received the nobility title. Legrad became headquarters of the well-known Legrad borderland, and the Zrinski bore the title of Captains of Legrad. The war archives in Vienna stored a visual graphic presentation of the fortress of Legrad from 1572. The fortress is perched on high grounds along the mouth of the Mura flowing into Drava and is surrounded with water. The rectangular fortress is enclosed with stockades and has semicircular bastions on each corner. There is only one door to the fortress, which can be reached from the land via a wooden bridge. In 1577, Legrad fell into Turkish hands, but 2 years later, the forces of Juraj IV Zrinski took it back. In spring of 1581, a large-scale flood heavily damaged the fortress. Then King Maximilian ensured the funds for the repairs. He also helped with repairs in 1583. Before the battle and the fall of Kanija, in October 1600, the Turks managed to conquer and destroy Legrad. The news from 1618 in turn speak of Legrad as being freed from the Turks and restored. There is a preserved graphic presentation of the fortress of Legrad from 1639 by Johann Ladentu. The whole complex is surrounded with water. The way into fortress leads through a line of double stockades up the very gate. There is a roofed keep above the gate. The fortress walls are built in stone with crowns and openings for firearms. The corners hold polygonal turrets with openings for cannons. The turrets are roofed. In the fortress itself, there are signs of roofs and cupolas of same buildings. Obviously, the old fortress of Legrad was modernized. After the Ottoman threat ceased to exist, the fortress was abandoned. Josip Bedeković finds it in ruins in 1752. On 10 August 1664, Simon Renninger, a special imperial commissioner, accepted the peace treaty in the Turkish military camp in Varshvar, which in the Article 6 stipulates that the fortress, which is positioned opposite Kanija, may be either renewed or supplied with forces by either of the parties, because at a given moment the fortress may incite rebellions. This in effect ended the war, which broke out in 1663, because of, among other reasons, the aforementioned Novi Zrin. Casus Belli, the fortress erected in 1661 at the joining point of the Kanija, Brook, and the Mura, on the left bank of Mura on the Turkish land, as it had been conquered by the Turks on 30th June 1664, and after 3-week siege burned down on 7th July, having thus disappeared from the face of the earth, although the early 18th century maps continued to mark it. Kotoriba is a newer settlement which came to exist in the period of stronger defense of Međimurja against the Turkish onslaught following the arrival of Zrinski into this area. First news of Kotoriba date back to 1567 when Međimurja was reigned by Juraj IV Zrinski. Due to immediate Turkish threat, he continued to build a protection system on the Mura River. His father, Nikola Zrinski of Sighet, has begun to build the system with an array of fortresses. In this context, there's a mention of the fortress of Kotoriba, which did not have civilian population but rather military forces. When in 1600 the big fortress of Kanija, today's Nachkanija fell into Turkish hands, the Turks seized the area up to the Mura. Then part of the population of Mura Senderli, who were fleeing from the Turkish tyranny, took refuge in Kotoriba. On 4th May 1688, Ivan Zubic, the Zagreb Dean, stayed in Kotoriba and left behind a description of Kotoriba fortress. The central part of Kotoriba fortress was rectangular in shape with small semicircle bastions on corners. The stockades served as defense walls, which were actually vertically rammed in logs in the earthen bulwark. It is all encircled with a narrow strip of water. Around the fortress there was an irregular rectangular shape of earthen bulwark with slanted stockades. There were wooden buildings within the fortress which housed a permanent crew of about 100 soldiers. The fortress was positioned on the highest topographic point in Kotoriba, near the building of today's primary school. On the ground plan of Kotoriba fortress, dating from the late 17th century, produced by the Italian Giovanni Giuseppe Spalla, kept today in the Military Historical Archives in Vienna, it is obvious that it is a typical fortification from the times of the battles with the Ottoman army. It had no water moats but was rather protected by the marshy terrain. From the fortress there was a road along the river Mura leading to Legrad fortress. The Zrinski, as the feudal landlords of several fortresses in estates with peasants in Croatian Primorje and Gorski Kotar, most probably had brought people into Kotoriba fortresses from these estates of theirs or from other southern regions of Croatia. It is supported that these soldiers had brought with them their national songs and wheel dancing. During 15th century, Podturen is mentioned as Castrum Turnišće, then as oppidum of the market town and the castle of the fortress Turnišće. In September 1601, there were 24,000 of Christian soldiers gathered in and around the Turnišće fortress, with the task of conquering back Kanija fortress, which had fallen into hands of Turks a year before. In 1644, Count Petar Zrinski bought back the fortress in the village of Podturen from the previously see Count Adam Bethany. The fortress of Podturen was also entered into the map by the chief imperial military engineer Martin Stier in 1660. In 1708 it was destroyed by the Rakoczy troops, which then devastated Međimurje. In 1693, Podturen is also mentioned as a market town which developed along the fortress Podturen. In this book, Geography of Illyrian Regions, Zagreb 1843, Dragutin Seljan says the following about Podturen, former Turnišće. Podturen, former Turnišće, is a market town in the center of Međimurje, with a wooden bridge over Mura. There used to be a famous fortress there destroyed at the time of Rakoczy rebellion, early 18th century. In the year 1860, a one-story school building was built in Podturen. The fortress is visible above St. Jeronim Church on Strigovačak Hill. Its function was last mentioned in 1749. The traces of the Roman fortification were found on the spot. It was mentioned in the deed of donation in which Međimurje was donated to Stjepan Lacković in 1350. The Italian Giovanni Giuseppe Spalla marked on the map 30 villages, 4 fortresses, Čaktrn, Čakovec, Kotoriba, Legrad, and Novi Zrin, 5 market towns and 19 watchtowers. Those were the towers of Toruška, Melikutec, Zemeninska, Nova Stroža, Domašinska, Kolikovina, Komparija, Letinška, Leškoška, Novi Čardak, Gornja, Ščukic, Pogorilec, Šavgarska, Zenjarški, Kakunja, Katanška, Šaborgore, Margore. At the time of Zrinski family reign in 16th and 17th centuries, they had their farmstead in Goričan. Since it was the time of immediate Turkish threat, the Zrinski formed a special administrative system in Međimurje as their most important estate. This administrative system remained in function even at the time of chamber administration following the crush of Zrinski and Frankopani conspiracy. At that time, Goričan was the center of dukedom, a special military organizational unit. The dukedom of Goričan included the village of Hodošan and abandoned village of Đurđijanec. Until 1691, Goričan was possessed by the Count Adam Zrinski, but then this part of Međimurje fell under the jurisdiction of royal chamber. Within the Polis monastery of St. Helena complex, founded in 1376, Nikola Zrinski of Siget built the family mausoleum in 1559. It was the best sign that the family seat definitely moved to Čakovec. The first to be buried in the mausoleum was Katarina Frankopan, the first wife of Nikola Zrinski of Siget. All the Zrinski family members were buried in the mausoleum, including their wives and children, while Nikola Zrinski of Čakovec was the last to be buried here on 21st December 1664. After the Zrinski and Frankopani conspiracy crushed, the official core politics declared the Zrinski blacklisted and saw them exterminate every trace of their existence. The Great Fire of 1695, which struck the Polish monastery in St. Helena, was used to turn their mausoleum into a chapel of the Blessed Virgin Mary. The remains of the members of the family, along with the inventory Zrinski trophies from numerous battles with the Turks, were thrown out of the mausoleum and gone forever. Today, only the foundations of the mausoleum have remained. The whole of the once grandiose complex of the Polish monastery has been reduced just to the sanctuary of the former monastery church with some magnificent Gothic frescoes by the Italian masters of the Vitali de Bologna school from the late 14th century. First archaeological excavation in the Polish monastery of St. Helena complex in Čakovec was buried out of the society Družba Braća Hrvatskog Zmaja. In 1924, under the guidance of Emilio Laskovski and Stjepan Savic Nosanan. The precious results of their research confirmed the thesis of the brutal revenge of the current politics of the time on the material and spiritual heritage of Zrinski family. All that was found in the mausoleum in 1695 was thrown out and destroyed, then built in foundations of the new church. Among other things, fragments of Nikola Zrinski's tombstone were found, and today they are kept in the Museum of Međimurja in Čakovec. Repeated excavations were carried out by the Museum of Međimurja in Čakovec team guided by Josip Vidović. Prior to creating the new ideological project of the whole complex presentation, it is necessary to buy out one house with a courtyard and perform revision archaeological research. Marchioness Anna Maria Pintelli Altan erected a 350-centimeter high stone monument in Kuršanečki Lug, Grove of Kuršanec, the place of Nikola Zrinski of Čakovec's death in 1728. Basically, the monument is conceived as a pillar of tabernacle type. At the foundation there is a column with the inscription and a profile cube that crowns the pyramid of concave planes, also with profiles. The long inscription in Latin talks about the death of the Croatian Ban Nikola Zrinski of Čakovec while hunting for a boar on 18 November 1664. Rich architectural heritage of the Zrinski family in Međimurje is an exceptional cultural and historical worth, an indelible imprint in the historical family story whose activities greatly influenced the development of the Croatian region bordered by Mura and Drava.